Hi, my name is Trinity and I am the proud owner of this big, beautiful 2003 Dodge Ram 1500, and today we are going to be changing the front brake pads of this truck. It's super quick, super simple, saves you a ton of money. All you ladies out there can definitely do this. We're just going to get started. So these are the supplies you will need and that I will be using throughout the video. I have a pair of work gloves because it does get messy. I have a 22mm socket for the lug nuts and the wheel, as well as an impact gun to remove them with. I have 1/2-inch socket for the ratchet that we will be using to take the caliper bolts out. A bungee cord to hold the caliper while we're working on the brake pads. I have a brush and brake cleaner for the surrounding area, disc brake quiet for the new brake pads that also include new hardware later on, a crowbar when we are working with the pistons and compressing them again, and then we have a torque wrench for putting the lug nuts back on and matching the manufacturing specifications. And then on the ground we have the floor jack and jack stand. So that is everything that we will be using for this project. So first thing we're going to do is put the jack in place. I happen to have a floor jack, but you can use whatever jack came with the truck you're working with. And we're just going to position it as close to the wheel as possible and jack it up. Safety first. Make sure you use this jack stand in case your jack fails and the truck falls on your face. Alright, so we got the wheel an inch or so above the ground. Now we're going to take the lug nuts off so that we can get the wheel, and I am going to be using an impact gun to do that. If you have the tire iron that came with the truck, that works just as fine, but I have a nice fun toy to use instead. Okay, so now that we're down here, before we take the caliper off, we are first going to relieve some of the pressure on the pistons. And to do that, we are going to use a little crowbar and push back so that there's more space between the pistons and the old brake pads and rotors. That way when we put the new brake pads in, there's enough space for them to fit. Okay, so our caliper bolts are 1/2 inch, so we are going to use a 1/2 inch socket, attach it to our ratchet, and the bolts are located one on top, another one on the bottom, and we're going to loosen them to take off the caliper. So now that the caliper bolts are off, we are going to take off the caliper, and because it's really heavy and we don't want it hanging by the brake line, I'm going to use this handy dandy bungee cord to secure it and make sure that it's not hanging. Now we are ready to take off our old brake pads, and we're going to do so just by sliding them right off. There's one, and the other one. And we're also going to take off the hardware for them. That's old. There's one, and the other one. Okay, so we are going to come up here where we have our new nice ceramic brake pads with brand new hardware. Yeah, here is a new one compared to the old one we had. It was definitely time to replace them. So we are going to now prep our new brake pads. So I like to use some of this brake quiet on the backs of the brakes pads. That way it minimizes any squeaking that may occur with vibrations. That's also what this new hardware is for. And we're just going to apply some to the back, let it sit for about 10 minutes. Yeah. So while we let the disc brake quiet set and dry on the brake pads, we are going to make sure all of our surfaces are clean. We're going to use some brake cleaner, non-chlorinated, so that we don't ruin the rubber seals on the pistons. The hardware we got goes a long way in making sure that your brakes don't squeak. However, if you didn't get that with your new brakes, this goes a long way in making sure that the surfaces that the brakes touch are nice and clean. It's okay to get messy. Here is our new hardware, bottom, top. We're just going to get that installed. Make sure it's nice and secured. Ten minutes later. Okay, so we are ready to put on our new brake pads. So we're going to come back over here and line them up. And this one that I dropped. Et voila. So to help keep the rotor in place and not be struggling to keep everything together, I secured a little 2x1 right in there so that it held everything in place while I worked to put the caliper back on. So now we're going to take it off the bungee cord and secure it around the pads. Okay, we can put the caliper bolts back in to secure it. So the caliper bolts don't need to be tightened too much, just about 40 foot-pounds should do it. Okay, so before we put the wheel back on, I am going to turn the truck on and straighten it back out so that it's easier to put on. dokie, now we're going to put the lug nuts back on, first by hand and then we'll bring back the impact gun. We're going to use a star pattern to put the lug nuts in. Okay, so now we're going to use the impact gun and go until the lug nuts are seated. And then we are going to get the torque wrench and make sure we match the manufacturer specifications for how tight to put these lug nuts in. It's important to make sure you do this because if not, you may warp your rotors if it's not to the correct torque. So now we have our torque wrench and the manufacturer specifications for Bruce is 130 foot-pounds. So. And that is one wheel done. So rinse, repeat, do it on the other side, and you are done with your front brake. And no, I did not turn my rotors, but don't believe all the shops that tell you you have to turn your rotors for every brake job. Mine were not warped, so there were no vibrations, so all I did was change the brake pads, and that is enough to get me to the next brake job. So all good here. Also, if hard work isn't incentive enough for you to change your own brakes, a brake job at a local shop would cost about $300, and I only spent $50 for all the supplies I needed to do it all by myself. So do it yourself.